This episode of Mikey on Mute is brought to you by Little Jerk Society. Little Jerk Society is a clothing company fueled by the raw energy of creative rebellion, celebrating those who march to the beat of their own drum. They care deeply about mental health and believe in a world where everyone can thrive, regardless of their challenges. Use promo code Mikey on Mute to save 15% on your order at littlejerkclothing.com. Again, that's littlejerkclothing.com. And remember, use promo code Mikey on Mute, all one word, to save yourself 15%. Go off and make a change.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mikey on Mute. As always, I'm Mikey, coming off mute to talk to you about my mental health journey, talk to others about theirs, and keep the conversation going. Let's make it less taboo. Today, I'm so excited to have my first interview. We are here with Kurt Sasso. Kurt is the host of Geeks Talking, an entertainment show with over 1,200 interviews with professionals in comics, TV and film, music, and video games. When he's not interviewing, Kurt is working in the TV and film industry as a DIT, saving your footage one card at a time. Kurt, how's it going tonight?
I'm doing good, Mikey. Thanks so much for having me on your show. And, I've seen you on the social medias there. So you seem to be doing great. And I can't wait to dive into whatever my psychology has in store. So you're saving me about $50 an hour.
Perfect. I'm glad I can help you out there as well. So social media has been such a help, especially Instagram and all these different networkings I've been able to kind of do. You find a mutual connection for us. It was Rena Friedman Watts, and you start to connect, which I went back and listened to your episode from her show. Great episode it was about a year and a half ago, maybe?
Something like that. Yeah.
So,
great show, great person. Honestly, she's been a wonderful supporter of shows like ours and like yourself. And I love the connections that she brings forward. So thanks so much to Rena for, telling me about this show.
Absolutely love that. So before we get into more on my side, I want to understand a little bit more about you, Kurt, and how you got into podcasting. What was kind of that catalyst for you, if you want to just give us a broad overview on that?
So before the popular phrase, let's make a podcast, which came into play, circa COVID 2019, etc. Back in 2008, when I first started, that was kind of the actual phrase of, hey, we're doing a webcomics.com database. We have all of these guests in this database. We should really interview these people and give them a platform to talk about themselves. And so my friend said, go ahead, I'm too busy. So I started doing TGT webcomics back then. Now it's Geeks Talking. It's evolved as of 2012 to do more video interviews and still kind of dive into the entertainment industry. Like you said, 1,200 plus interviews. I've actually lost count. I probably have more. 670,000 downloads, over 3,000 plus downloads, bringing back the podcast as of 2022. But every conversation I have with these amazing, talented people is just a new story that they want to tell about themselves. And I'm glad that I'm on part of that journey. And it's brought me to some pretty fun places. And even to have repeat guests come back 10 plus years later, it's always a fun experience to have, saying, I remember you when.
I distinctly, like I said, I just listened to your episode of Better Call Daddy where you were on with Rena, and you had mentioned how great it is to have people back because you don't get the full story or everything you can say in one conversation. So that really made me kind of rethink things and look in a broader term, and I thought it was really cool. So I really like learning about what kind of drove you to that.
Yeah, no, it's always a learning experience for me. It really is. It's just one of those things where we don't know the full story unless we ask the right questions. And I think that's the hardest part about not only being a host, but also being a person. How do we communicate with each other to get down to the heart of whatever we're trying to dive into?
it's really tough with communication. As humans, and I'm not a therapist, again, this is just me talking my experience, but as humans, we have this desire to, we are listening and we hang on to a keyword and we're already doing our reply in our head. And so trying to take that time to listen, to understand, not rush through a conversation. So having multiple conversations can really give you the chance to feel things out, understand it fully before you do have to respond.
Well, it's also difficult, especially in entertainment, where I'm diving into different genres, but everyone is still a creative person in some way, shape, or form. So, at the heart of it, that's kind of why I'm eventually going to get my documentary together called Little Person Amongst Media Giants. It's one of those things where everyone is creative, but everyone's introverted or introspective or whatever the case may be, and they don't know how to communicate about their creativity. And so that's why the show kind of came to be. And 16 years later, I'm knocking wood still doing it. So it is what it is.
I love to hear that, and giving that voice to those that don't know how to express that creativity or get it out there. And so it's amazing to see. I really respect that you don't have like a single niche that you hang on to, that you really are exploring so many different mediums. And it brings me to my question as far as personally, what are some mediums that you like to use when you need to escape reality for a little bit? Maybe it's a certain type of video game or reading a book. I'd love to hear, kind of get into what's your escape from everything.
Video games. That's really it's video games and anime or manga or whatever. It's one of those things where it is my escapism. I love to read. I haven't read a lot of books lately, and shame on me, but it's just a time factor. Like everything's a time factor. What am I saying? It just comes back to I play a lot of video games. I'm making video games just to kind of get myself a little fresher when it comes to staying relevant in terms of the industry. I want to get into visual arts or visual special effects, I should say, for TV and film. That's kind of why I'm learning different programs. But everything is an escapism if you just decide to escape from it. So yeah, video games, comics, manga, anime. I love the Japanese animation and foreign films and things like that. It's just I just love it.
That's great. And video games are such it's not as, we talk a lot about, things that are seen in a very different way. People that played video games 20, 25 years ago, when it was kind of more of a, I know you like using the words like nerd and geek and things like that, that you would be seen. And now it's a whole industry, and it's not the weird people anymore. You're almost taboo or off if you're not playing video games, which is interesting because when people ask me, I always say, I've been a PlayStation person for my whole life. That's kind of the console that hooked me in, and I like doing that. But I'm not big into all of the games that are popular now. I play a lot more of just like, I stick to the Madden franchise.
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know, Back in the day, I played some Kingdom Hearts and
Mhm.
Final Fantasy, but I I love seeing the evolution of it, and just, I guess, want to hear from your side, what is one of your favorite evolutions about video games from, when you started to now? I know that's a broad question, but what is one thing you really are so happy that's improved over that time?
I think graphics. That is a huge factor. Graphics for sure. You know, it's funny. You look at the graphics from the '80s. You got 8-bit to 16-bit, which was a huge revolution when it came to the visual medium that became video games. I mean, I grew up with a Commodore 64, so I remember the old school graphics from way back when, from the original PC days. But the graphics have been so amazing. The level of storytelling has really improved. I'm a music buff, so I love, you mentioned Final Fantasy. I mean, just that alone is like a soundtrack of my life. I mean, John Williams as well. So there are certain things in life that just kind of you gravitate towards. Like for me when I went to high school. I was a computer geek. I was in the football. I played football, and I was in the school band. So I was like the trifecta of all the cliques of high school. So I couldn't push myself into my own locker or anything like that. So it was one of those things. But it just comes back to I could talk to every single group or every single clique and still remain relevant and still kind of have something to talk about and not feel awkward. And I think that kind of stems from just wanting to fit in. I think it really is what it boils down to. And yeah, like give me a good soundtrack and I'll listen to a YouTube playlist that's just orchestral or, Cyberpunk 2077 or whatever the case may be. That's just whatever groove I want to get into is what I'll listen to. And it is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely love that. You talk a little bit about what groups and cliques you were in high school, and it's great to have that variety and that you could talk to everybody. Going back to that time frame, because middle school and high school can be some of the toughest times in our lives, really a developmental period. With your, we discussed that, a little bit older than I am. I'm not going to like throw you under the bus here. But I guess when you were in high school, when you're in these, trying to fit in with all these different cliques, what did mental health look like for you at that time? I know it's really tough because it's not something that we really talked about a lot back then, but where were you kind of mind wise, and what was the perception from your peers? If you just want to give me a glimpse into that.
Well, the first question would be from that perspective is we're talking early 90s or early to mid 90s for high school specifically. There was no such thing as mental health. There literally, it was that word was not even in the lexicon of any teacher or whatever. But what they did have realistically was a guidance counselor. That was kind of your guiding light towards what you wanted to do as a career. And that's, in a sense, was the first real way that we had any mental health advocacy, because their focus was, what do you want to do with your career? What do you want to do with your life? And here's how we can achieve that. It was about setting goals and setting, kind of boundaries for ourselves as young teens, as teenagers. And, that shaped our lives in a sense that, we were the generation of go out at night, come back when the lights come on type deal. And, here's a key, make yourself some Kraft macaroni and cheese and away you go. We were very self-sufficient, and that kind of carries on in life, but we know how to deal with things, but we don't know how to deal with ourselves. And I think that's the hardest part. Like nowadays it's okay. How do we talk about ourselves? How do we talk about our struggles and our stresses and things like that? And now we have avenues to do that. But back then it's like, okay, let's bottle this up and let's move on to the next thing that we can actually achieve. And, let's work out at the gym and vent all that anger, which is probably why I did football, just to kind of vent my frustration being a 5'3" kid in, high school and everyone else is 6 foot. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really a big mindset as I talk to family members and friends and everything like that. As far as, yeah, the guidance counselor, you went there, hey, let's talk about, how can we prep you for exams? How can we prep you for the real world? And there was not really a conversation of, this is a space where you go to talk about what's going on. We know that things like depression and anxiety and everything like that have been there, but they were not keywords. They were not, how phrases that everyone was using or anything like that. So it's really interesting, even for me. And for me, high school was, 2004, 2007, kind of that was my range. Even then, the guidance counselor was very much just like, for you, what are you going to do with your career? I remember halfway through high school, I think, is when our school got our first gay and straight alliance. So even a conversation about sexual orientation and identity and everything like that. So still in the early 2000s, it was not something we didn't have, you didn't go there if you weren't feeling well mentally. You went there if you were not feeling well or you wanted to get out of a test or something like that. You went to the nurse and
Right.
made up that you had to go home. But it's so strange that we just kind of raw dogged it through there and made it through. And we I've talked a lot in the past about toxic masculinity and how we're kind of taught that that's just kind of what you do, not just for men or anything like that, but that was kind of for everybody. You whatever you were going through, you just kind of rode that bull through. And so I look back and I'm amazed that all of us still kind of made out, how we did. So.
Well, I think, well, in terms of high school, we got lucky. I went to Kennedy, so I'm Canadian, but I went to Kennedy, and it was a very academic school. So there wasn't any of those like tough neighborhood schools or whatever that you had to deal with that were in the city and still are in the city, to be perfectly honest. But it was a different culture, different time. So for gay and straight people, because we had many of those whatsoever, for sure. And it's like, okay, and it is what it is. It wasn't like they were targeted or anything like that, because it was just another day at school. Like, we didn't have to worry about that too much. And now I'm speaking from obviously a cis male perspective, but basically when it came down to it, it's like, okay, you're gay, cool, you could tell, and wonderful. You have a good relationship with them, awesome, great. It's just another day in the classroom, in the school, and great friendships down the road, and you reconnect with them at various reunions or whatever, and you see them on social media nowadays, and they're happy, and that's a good thing. So it is what it is.
It's always good to see people living authentically how
Yeah.
they can. I think a lot of our school years are trying to find what works, whether that is trying to fit in or trying out different things to see what works for us. I know going into high school, I thought football was going to be my thing. I went to practice for a couple weeks and I said, this is not not something that I'm gonna hang on to. So went and checked out theater, became involved in the tech crew, ran the soundboard, built
Nice.
sets, fell in love with musicals. That was kind of where I really got that hold on. And there was such an accepting group of people. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't, we weren't being bullied or anything for being in tech crew. We weren't being bullied for our identity or anything like that. A lot of what I saw was, weight related, or glasses were still a thing that people for some reason were like, how dare you need to see. But yeah, it's strange now to I have two sons, they're 13 and 16, and to see what they have to kind of go through, and how there is a mix of how the world is more accepting, but also I think there's more of a freedom of speech where people feel more confident in talking about their hate.
Mm.
And that can be really tough, especially at that age, because they have to deal with it through social media and the internet. We at least got to go home, and if we weren't playing LAN parties with our friends or something like that, then we weren't really bothered by them. So I really think it's been interesting. The internet's great and has connected us in so many ways, but I think it really has opened up that ability for people here, at least in America, to talk openly with their hatred and their blindness.
Yeah, Canada's not doing much better, to be perfectly honest. It's been a real shift in the last 8 or so years when it comes to that type of culture, and it's a shame. It really is. But who knows what's going to happen, and hopefully we just don't see any bombs drop. That's a good thing.
That's all. And so I really appreciate that. I guess going from high school years to where you're at now,
Mhm.
do you have any like defining moments that changed your view of mental health, or anything for you personally that kind of came up that forced you to take a little bit more like a harder look at it? Or was it more of just a, hey, went through life, kind of grew up, matured, and now I have a better view of it?
I can't say that there's one defining moment whatsoever. It's because I've lived my life just what's the next goal to achieve, what's the next goal to push through. Probably not the best solution when it comes to mental health, but that's how I've dealt with it. Um,
Mhm.
because I've had a supporting family, a wonderful mother. She supported me through everything. Good good father in my life, good stepfather, etc. Um, I've just had to deal with it, and it's whether it's good for me or not. It's just how I've lived my life, and I've asked for help when needed, and it's worked out well. I haven't needed to go to a psychologist or anything like that because it's been small things that are easy to get through because there's a solution for it. There's a possibility to get through it. There's not a roadblock where I don't know what to do. But I'm still not afraid to ask the question, how do I get through it? How can I get through this without, damaging my mentality? And that's the hardest part. So when it comes to my life, I mean, graduate high school, go right into college, went right into college for IT, worked in IT for 20 years, got burnt out with the industry, and I went back to school for visual arts and film. So with a minor in computer science, because do what you know. But that was 4 years as an older student dealing with young kids, 18 years old plus. You have a different mindset than everyone else. Because you grew up differently. You grew up in a different era, quite literally decades earlier than them. And how you work through problems versus how they work through problems is completely different. The communication factor, as I hinted at earlier, comes into play. How as an older person can you communicate with the younger person in terms of what you want to accomplish? Even though your way is right, is it accepting to them to actively do that situation? Yeah. Even though that solution is going to work, it's going to solve the problem at hand, is that the right one? And I learned this in IT as well. There's always 4 ways to solve the same problem. No matter what, if it's the same problem every single time, there's 4 ways to solve it. And that's how I lived 20 years in IT, because I knew I could solve it in one way, shape, or form. Well, how can you take that mentality of that problem solving skills and turn that into your own life? Now there's only 2 ways.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I have talked to my therapist a few different times, and there will be times where he has to stop me. And it's because we as humans and animals are problem solvers. That's what our brains do. And that's how I want to approach problems. I want to learn as much information about it as possible. What evidence can I gather? How can I make that, thesis and everything like that? And sometimes he's like, you need to step back. You're overthinking it and you're over trying to solve the problem. And there are going to be times in life where you just have to accept that things are not great and you can't solve it at that moment. And that's a really hard lesson for me as somebody that wants to fix things, especially for other people, for the ones I care about. So on those moments where I just have to stop and go, I can't solve this right now, and I'm just going to have to be okay with it. Those are my growing opportunities. So it's interesting when you say something like, you just approach it that there's always 4 ways to solve a problem. Have you had success with that? It seems like you have, but I guess if you had any moments where you've tried to do problem solving with life and maybe there was a roadblock and you had to be okay with that?
I think it comes back to knowing when to back off. I think that's sometimes the hardest part. And it's more so, it was more so work related than home life for me, because it's like you would be dealing with high level executives, let's say, or managers or things like that. You knew solutions to solve the problems, but for some reason they wouldn't go along with it. And then it's a matter of, do you fight the battle of, well, here's the reasoning why, here's what I've come up with, and you're still saying no. Well, I can't put myself into your shoes because I don't have your experience. Even if you were to explain it to me, I know my way is still right, and you still won't do it. Why? Things like that.
Incredibly frustrating. Yeah,
it is. But I mean, whether it was money, whether it was a skill, whether it was okay, you're going to implement this new process. Now you have to train 500 other people on this same process. But it is what it is. So that's why I like entertainment, because it's a lot easier to deal with. I press record, I do my questions, I edit it, I put together the short form content, and away I go. It's straight to the point. It's what I've been doing for the past 16 years. It's easier.
Yeah. I'm very early in on my journey here. I've put out 12 episodes so
Good.
far. Again, great to see the reception for it and everything. It is quite interesting the dynamic that it allows me, because if you were to put me in front of a room of 50 people, I would not want to sit there and present. I've had to do that for work in the past, and uh, it doesn't really get there. But if I can go onto a podcast, I could talk for hours and record and put all this out, and it really allows me kind of that extra medium. And I don't know if it's something to hide behind necessarily, but I think it just opens up more possibilities and ways for me to work through it. And so I'm not going to go down that negative route that I previously would, where, oh, you're hiding behind the microphone and all that. No, this is just how it works for me, and embracing that. So that's kind of where I'm at in my early journey here.
It's a fun journey, but it can be a stressful journey. And just from experience, the fact that you're taking this step, the fact that you've passed 10 episodes, which, by the way, congratulations. That's usually the wall that people face because they're bored with it. It is what it is. But you're finding something, one, that you're passionate about talking. You're finding people that you can talk to, and you're actively asking good questions. And I think if you can keep that going and then expand on what you're doing in terms of your questions or in terms of what you want to actively talk about, then your show's only going to grow. And it's different enough where it's not like it's not about sports, it's not about geek culture, it's whatever. You're looking into mental health, which is a lot of people can claim to talk about, but not many people do. And you're coming at it from a fresher perspective because you're not in the psychology field. So you're trying to dive into the bare bones questions of what makes people tick from a mental health aspect. And that's very commendable.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and it means a lot, especially coming from somebody that has been doing it for so long and has the experience, and that's really good to see. And I not only appreciate the words you've said now, but also the conversations we've had online previously. I definitely feel like this will not be our last conversation. I can already tell you that much. So, uh, as we come to nearing the end of our episode, I did ask you what is one question you wanted me to ask,
Sure.
and that's something I kind of want to gauge to see what they're thinking. As far as my guests, your question was very intriguing because your question was, Kurt, are you happy?
So I've been asked that question once before. And it threw me. Honestly, it was one of those questions out of left field I had never heard before in being a guest on anyone else's show. Are you happy? And I had to think about that one before, and that was a couple of years back. So for me, am I happy? Yes and no. And it's not because of finances or anything like that. That would be the no factor of it. But I'm happy because of a few things. I'm happy my family is still around. I'm happy I still have that connection. I'm happy that I can still connect with my friends. I'm happy that I'm doing this journey as a host. I'm happy that I get to hear other people's stories. I'm happy to get to talk to yourself. So from a maybe a superficial perspective, I am happy. But emotionally, yeah, I am happy. It's just, this is my life. This is what I've chosen to do. And this is what I want to continue to do for as long as I can. So I am happy, and I could always be happier. Maybe there's someone else in my life I could bring in, but that's not quite there yet. So we'll see what it is. For now, I'll just talk to people. That's just a quick, simple, easy conversation and relationship to have.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one that you can control the outcome.
Yes.
I always say if you can determine how things fall into place, it seems to work out a little bit. Putting yourself past that is where great things can happen, but also terrible things have happened. So I
Plus,
get
I can
that.
hang up on the call after too.
Exactly. That is something that this generation will not get to do. They will not get to take the phone and slam it down.
Yep.
So, Kurt, I really do appreciate you doing this talk with me. And like I said, I've had so much fun just in the short time that we've talked. Before we go, where can everybody that's listening find you? What are some of your social medias they should check out? Where can they listen to you?
Well, Mikey, I got to appreciate you. First off, for taking the time to do this. I think this will be a wonderful step on your journey from a video interview perspective as well as a show perspective. So I hopefully you continue on this journey for many years to come. To find me, though, to find myself at Two Geeks Talking, you can, of course, find this interview on our website, tgtmedia.com or twogeekstalking.com. That's TWO. See, even I can script my own outro. Website's going through a complete revamp, so go to our website, our YouTube channel, I should say, which is youtube.com/TGT Media. The podcast can be found at twogeekstalking.podbean.com or just search Two Geeks Talking wherever you get your podcasts. And as I say every week, everyone has a story to tell. It's up to me to help bring that out. Thanks for listening and watching on Two Geeks Talking, and of course, Mikey on Mute.
And I am so thankful to be one of the geeks on this conversation, at least. So, as always, until the next time I find somebody that's willing to jump on and talk to me, I'm Mikey, going back on mute. Take care of yourself.
This episode of Mikey on Mute is brought to you by Dubby Energy. Dubby is a clean energy drink loaded with vitamins and nootropics. Dubby is sugar-free, has 0 calories, and 0 artificial coloring. Use promo code MikeyOnMute to save 10% on your order at dubby.gg. That's DUBBY.GG. And remember, promo code MikeyOnMute, all one word, will save you 10%.